Okay.
Like my purpose is to eat bananas every day. And where did you get that? Well, I just
Made it up.
Yeah. So you need to ask yourself, if you have a concept of a deity or a God, which is the universe, and you think the universe brought you into existence and must have a reason to bring you into existence. So you can't just assume the reason of my existence to find out what the existence is, my purpose is. No, that's you speculating. So has the universe told you specifically, or anyone else for that matter?
My idea of the purpose of why I'm here.
No, not my idea, not your idea.
Yes, I'm telling you my idea.
No, not your idea. I'm not interested in your idea.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the universe's reason. What is the reason the universe created you? So to know that, we have to go to where? This brother? Well, if I say he's the source to find out why the universe created you, does he have a communication with the creator or this universe?
That I know of, no.
Right. So he can be excluded. We have to go to the universe. So have you got a direct communication from the universe telling you, Imo, I created you for that purpose?
Not directly, but I still pray every day. So I try to communicate.
No, this is you reaching out.
Yeah.
Right? Look, you can look at this beautiful woman and say, oh, I love her and so on, but she doesn't even know you. It doesn't work. Does the creator that you think exists told you why it has created you? Is the question. So have you had a communication from the creator?
A direct communication? Yeah. No.
Right,
But
so
then-
how do you then know for sure and have that conviction with certainty that this is the reason the universe created you?
Because I'm here and I'm talking and I exist.
Okay,
There's a
my
purpose to it.
my
There's a
purpose
there's a cause
is,
for
my
everything.
purpose in life is to eat chocolates every day.
And you can do that.
No, is that the reason the creator created me?
If you believe it, then
No, it's not
that's
what
what
it's not what I want to believe. It's about the reality, facts. So if the creator created me for eating chocolates, and actually it's the purpose for every human being to eat chocolates, and you're not doing that, then you're actually disobeying the creator.
Yeah,
Right.
From your perspective.
No. If that was in reality, the purpose of human creation. So it's essential for us to know for sure then why we are created. So it's not any benefit for us to speculate. Oh, Mansoor says the reason we are created is to eat chocolates. Well, I'm sure many people will disagree. So how did you know that? This is what the creator said. That's why exactly we ask you. How do you convince yourself with some evidence at hand that the creator indeed created you for whatever purpose that was?
The fact that there's good and bad in the world.
Don't go into speculation. Your speculation is,
How can I give you a definitive
let
answer?
me tell you what it is. To have answer to this question, why are we created by a creator? I can speculate. Like I came up with a very silly idea that we are created to eat chocolates, right? People can come up with millions and zillions of ideas like that. Speculation. What we are interested in, a foolproof way of knowing directly from the creator what the purpose is. So in the absence of that, whatever you say, oh, there's good and bad, there's this, these are all speculations. And people, not us, Tom, Dick and Harry's, philosophers who people think they're very clever, they have come up with lots of different ideas themselves and they don't agree. Okay? So Indian Sanatani philosophers might think baking your own feces and eating it a form of worship and having this communion with God. You might say that's disgusting. So to make sure that we don't fall into this error of human speculations when it comes to the reality of things, we really have to be critical in our approach. Yep.
Logical and
Critical. So critical thinking means then, if you're going to hold on to this idea why you created, do you have that communication from the creator directly? And you said no. That means you cannot be sure what your purpose is. Yeah, that's your opinion.
Can you be sure what your purpose is? And
Yes.
if so, can you demonstrate it?
Yeah. We can only be sure by knowing what the creator has told us. So our purpose in life, we don't just say this is what it is. We have communication directly from the creator.
But you
And
can say
based
every
on
single religion.
wait. Based on that, this is the claim we make. This next question is, how do you establish that that was the direct communication from the creator? In principle, it's agreed. Yep, it makes sense. If the Creator told you directly, then that would be the purpose of your life. So this is something that we have to agree on, first of all. And if you ask me that, I would say, yeah, of course, the Creator has communicated to us directly. And as Muslims, we will tell you, the Creator gave His communication, His words, His speech, His guidance to a human agent. We call a prophet or a messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His name is Muhammad, okay? 1400 years ago. And he received that message from God, and He's given it to us, and we can actually examine this message today. How do we then, by looking at this message itself, establish that indeed this is from Creator, from our God? And the one who gave us, how do we establish He's indeed the recipient of that message, not an imposter, not a fake individual claimed to be, oh, I receive revelation, I receive inspiration, I receive truth from God. So it's two things, right? One is to ascertain and be confident of the prophet and the messenger, that he is indeed a prophet and messenger of this Creator. And second is, whatever he's brought, is that truly, evidently, the message from God. Do you agree so far? This is the process we should take? Good. So let's start with the prophet. How was he before he claimed to be a prophet? Because if we find an individual, excuse me, no, just leave that. Okay, I mean, never mind. If we find an individual who has known in his community to be a deceptive individual, a fraud, a liar, a dishonest individual, his community testified to that, and whatever that he says later, you will be questioning his motive. I mean, this man is known to be a fraud, a fraudster. How am I going to believe in him? What basis do I have? What reasonable basis, logical basis do I have to trust him? You really have to go and, turn everything upside down and say, okay, let me give him a benefit of doubt and let's see whether he's truthful now, he's changed his mind. Do you see the problem here? Because you really have to go and understand deeply whether he's repented and so on and so forth, but still there will be a question. He could be making another lie, another fraud. Yep. That's how we should start assessing it. But when you examine Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what you will find is totally opposite. For the 40 years of his life, his community testified about him that he is a truthful individual, a reliable person. As-Sadiq al-Amin. This was a title given to him. A truthful, reliable, trustworthy individual.
Can I ask you a question then? So if the Prophet Muhammad was so trustful and everyone believed in what he was saying, why was there conflict during and after he died?
Sure. Conflict of what nature?
So there were people that rebelled against what he was teaching.
Yeah.
The Arabs at the time that believed in polytheism, they were all against it. His own uncle was against it.
Correct. So let me explain. So in principle, at least he stands out as a candidate for our scrutiny and assessing him whether indeed he could be potentially a recipient of the revelation, because he's truthful. That's what the claim is. And then you have these other objections. We'll come to that. So let's establish, his truthfulness by giving an example. So when he received revelation from God, he demonstrated that, in terms of exposing the hypocrisy of his people as well, because he knows his people how it's like. He's been living with them for 40 years. So he went into one of the mountains and he called them. Just like in the earlier times when there was no, mobile phones or emergency alarms and things like this, people had different mechanisms. Like they would go to a church bell, ding, 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 and then, you have to all gather together, right? Arabs had a similar kind of emergency call, emergency protocol. So if somebody goes on the top of the mountain and says, Ya Sabaha, something of this nature, they will say something important that we need to all go.
How Jesus was preaching to Jews at the time.
Possibly. So they all left their work, their study, their attendance, whatever it might be. They came to this place. An imminent danger perhaps. That's why someone is calling them. This is the routine protocol. So he said to them, if I told you that there's an army behind the mountain waiting to attack you, would you believe? Guess what they said?
What did they say?
Have a guess. He said, here it was again. He said, if I told you there's an army waiting to attack you behind the mountain, would you believe me? What do you think they would have replied?
If they believed what he was saying about preaching and everything, they would believe him. They'll say yes.
They would say yes based on what?
Based on
their previous experience of him, that he never lied. Yep. And they indeed said that, we would believe you because we've never known you to lie. And then when he said, I come to tell you that God has made me a prophet, I'm paraphrasing the narratives, He's made me a prophet to tell you and inform you that there is no deity or gods worthy of worship. Not these idols that you worship, but there is only one and only God that we should all worship, abandoning all these false gods. That's where some of them people turned aside. Because what's going to happen now? Because they realize their whole livelihood, their whole economy, their whole business is based on this polytheistic belief system of making idols in Mecca. People will come for Hajj and different occasions, bring in money. Yeah? And now all of these idols are defunct. They are now totally annihilated. They are no longer in action. So no one will come and give them any homage, any puja, any worship, any money, any resources. Financially, they will be all bankrupt and dead. Their business. That's why they were saying, what? They didn't want to do that. But those who, of course, understood already that there cannot be more than one God, of course they realized, indeed, it must be it. That was just from his statement and claim alone, from his character. Not looking at any other evidence. The only evidence those were impressed by is his 40 years of life in which he demonstrated the purity of character, truthful, reliable. Okay, so they turned later on, instead of accepting this call, to fight him, to oppose him, to stop him calling people to the worship of one God. Yeah, worship of one God. That was their problem with him. So when he started calling people later on, stop burying your daughters alive, of course, it was a tradition that was so much in their blood and their skin or bones. It's in my blood, in my flesh and blood. So much that it requires for them to really wake up. Like, why am I burying my daughters alive? So when the Quran came with that message, it really woke some people and said, yeah, we should stop doing that practice. But others, for them, this is our tradition. Why are we going to? So these kind of revolutionary ideas that goes against societal norms, people can react to and oppose. It's a natural thing. Those who are
even before the Prophet, we've seen it with Jesus, and we've seen it probably before that as well. And when with Moses or Musa, whatever you want to call him, people were opposed to him when he came to Egypt and tried to exile the Jews. People were against the Ten Commandments. People were worshipping idols even then. So we've seen this before. We've seen the connection.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen.
So there's a human nature in which they oppose and react to something that goes against their tradition, their desires, their feelings, and what they're happy and comfortable with. That's a natural and not a normal thing for in most societies. So what happened then? He gave them the message of the Quran. That message was what? Worship the Satan? Worship the creation? Worship me? None of that. He said, no, worship the one who created all of these things. Because the one who deserves your worship is the one who gave you life, who brought everything to existence. Now, that message itself, if you examine the message now, it's sensible. It's something that your heart and your mind will say, yeah, why am I going to worship a tree, a man or a woman, or the moon, or the sun, or the rivers? Makes no sense. These are all limited, dependent, finite things which are not worthy of our worship. Is my umbrella worthy of worship? Why not?
Created by a man.
Okay. Why should you worship an umbrella? But there are people who believe God can become an umbrella and still be a God. So that's what we need to start thinking about, why people believe in such a things. That's another discussion. So, coming to this point. So the message that he brought about don't worship idols or anything of the creation, but worship God, is not a message inspired by any evil things. It's a message of purity and truth. That's what you expect from a sound intellect to accept. Okay. The way he then brought the message is the second evidence that comes in now, assessing the message that he brought.
Yeah.
When he brought this message, the Quran came in a language which was familiar and yet unfamiliar to them. What do I mean by that?
So he was illiterate, but he could speak Arabic.
It was familiar yet unfamiliar. And what do I mean by that? So he brought the Quran in the Arabic language, the language of the people.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if the
Quran,
Quran,
he was an ethnic Arabic.
If the Quran came in Chinese, they would not know what it means. No. Exactly, right? It was in Arabic, but they noticed a subtle difference. It came in a form that was not only beautiful, eloquent, full of meaning, but something else. In a way that is composed, that they realized this is not something that they could do. And what I mean by that is this. Arabs at that time, they took pride in two things. One is the birth of a child. What kind of child? Son or a daughter? Son. Because they would bury their daughters alive. Why they would bury their daughter alive? They will take the daughters, at whatever point, they will take that daughter and bury her alive. Why? Because they considered, in their faulty thinking, that's a financial liability. Because they have to look after her and marry her off with everything, and then they don't have that financial resource. Just like today, how people abort female fetuses. It hasn't changed. People do that. They abort. If the fetus is female, they abort it. So this kind of infanticide, of female infanticide, still rampant in today's society. Anyway, that's another discussion. So they would pride themselves in two things. One is the birth of a son. It's not a daughter anymore. They don't have to bury, because the son will accompany them, bring them honor and glory, and fight with them and work with them and so on. So that's how they made themselves really, really happy and proud, right? That was point one. Assalamu alaikum. The other thing that they're proud about, and they celebrated, is the composition of poetry. They love poetry so much that they used to hold competitions in the markets, like Market of Wakaz. They'd go there, and the best poem they would hang on the wall of the Kaaba. Remember, Kaaba to them is a very sacred place. Okay? They would worship the idols within the Kaaba. There were many idols inside the Kaaba. And when Prophet Muhammad came, of course, he destroyed all of them from the Kaaba, cleansed it. But this is how Kaaba, the cube, Muslims circumambulate in Hajj. Yeah. This was the first house built for the worship of God, right? So they would hang the poem, the best of them, in the wall of the Kaaba. That's why they are called mu'allaqat, the hanging, suspended poems. And some of those poems are available to us today. Available. We can still read them. Translated by A.J. Arbery. It's called the Seven Odes. You can read about it. Even in English, how he captures the beauty and the way they describe things. Really, really nice, right? So they were masters in oration, masters in eloquence, masters in the way how they describe their loved ones. If they describe something like sorrowful, you would cry. If they describe a woman in her beauty, you would lust for her. If they describe something about like this particular tribe is an enemy, you would be ready to fight them. This is the power of speech that they had. They excelled in this capability. So poetry was their thing, right? When the Quran came in response to this in the Arabic language, saying, look, this man for 40 years of his life has not been taught how to read or write, has not been taught how to read any scripture, because you know him. He grew up among you. So the Creator, gave them the Quran, says, okay, if you really have doubt that he is now a recipient of revelation, produce something like it, because you are the masters of language. If you can't do it yourself, do it all together. Have your support, except God, except Allah. But if you don't do it, and the Quran says you'll never be able to do it, then fear the fire whose fuel is man and stones. So what did they do then? Yeah, man will fuel the fire of hell and stones. Now we know how stones can really bring hot fire, heat. But men will be the fuel of fire. Which men? The one who deserves it. Men mean humankind. Men, yeah. So the point is, the Quran gave them an opportunity to falsify the Quran. To say, look, if you really think he's not a prophet, all you have to do with your mastery of Arabic language, with your eloquence in the language, produce a chapter. Whole Quran, you can't do it? No problem. How about 10 chapters? You can't do 10 chapters? How about one chapter, one surah? And how long is one chapter? The shortest chapter is how long? About 3 lines, 3-4 lines. So it wouldn't be difficult for them. But did they manage to compose something like the Quran. We have historical testimony of the people saying, لَيْسَ هَذَا كَلَامُ الْبَشَرِ. This is not the sayings of a human being. It's impossible. So this tradition continued to this day, and people have written for hundreds of years the so-called attempts people are doing. Do you think people have stopped attempting? You can go on the internet, surah like it, and you will see that, oh, there you go, that's what an imitation is. But all of these attempts, they amount to naught, zero. Why? Because they don't even understand. Some of them bring Psalms 23 in English. They think, there you go, it's an imitation of the Quran.
Mention that about poetry, they're saying that Islam has the best poetry in terms of beauty, in its language, in its literature. But poetry is another aspect of culture which has existed before religion. So you see poetry in other religions as well. You see it in Hinduism, in the Vedas, in the Bhagavad Gita.
Poetry is everywhere.
Exactly.
That's not the point.
So I don't get why do you make
I'm
it...
explaining.
Yeah.
The point is the way things are composed. Like when Shakespeare wrote his sonnets,
Exactly.
you can be genius like Shakespeare and imitate it. When Paul, the author of many letters in the New Testament, when he wrote his letters, you know, scholars today of the New Testament, they say this letter,
He didn't write that.
he didn't write it,
I don't
but
believe that. I don't believe he wrote that. I never believe that.
but do you know why they say that?
Why?
Because it is not in the style of Paul. Paul has a particular way of writing. So when they see another writing not like him, they'll say, Paul didn't compose and author this letter. So people have own composition, way of writing. Okay? What the Quran is saying, now you've understood it. Bring something like the composition of the Quran. So people, instead of writing, imitating the Quran, they didn't understand the message, they write something in English. Total misunderstanding of the challenge of the Quran is. If I say bring an umbrella like this one, yeah? And you bring, is that like this umbrella? This umbrella is particular length, particular color, particular structure, shape and so on. This is nothing like it. This is matter and this is matter. That's not how this is similar. So you need to bring another umbrella, but what if you bring an umbrella which was all white? I would still say it's not like it, because that one is white. Yeah. So when the Quran says bring a chapter like it, you need to know how the likeness of the Quran is. And the Quran has been objectively shown of its composition, how the Quran is in its structure. This is what we call stylistics.
If you're saying that there's nothing like the Quran, same way you could bring the exact copy of this umbrella, there's an exact copy of this umbrella like this. Am I right or am I wrong in saying that?
We didn't say bring exact, similar.
Okay, but they're in the same color, weight and everything. This is the only umbrella that was ever invented.
You can bring an umbrella and say this is why similar. Similar in the...
I'm saying that there was more than one umbrella that was created in the same way, in this pattern, this color, the same way. So like when you go to the shop and bought this umbrella,
Quran doesn't say bring exactly like the Quran, word for word, letter for letter, sound for sound.
I'm saying...
In that way, what you'll bring the same Quran.
But then you could say scriptures before that existed before the Quran are similar in a way.
No.
How are they not?
To give you an example, it's going to rain soon. To give you an example, when the Quran says, for example, first chapter, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, praise, all gratitude be to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds.
Hear, O Israel, your Lord, or the Lord our God is one.
You're not focusing what I'm saying.
Repeat.
So in Arabic structure, it is such that this is way the Arabs never spoke in any of their literature. They have prose, they have poetry, sayings of the kahan, the kahin. They don't speak like this. They never use this particular word, hamd, to praise in the beginning of a sentence with a definitive noun like alhamdu. They will say hamdan, yeah, with a indefinite article, yeah, not a definite article, the praise. When it says Rabbul Alameen, Lord of all the Alameen, the Arabs never had in their vocabulary a word which is Alameen in a plural form of Alam, meaning world, because to them there is only one world, Alam. So how can you bring something like Alameen? It's like, did people have a vocabulary? Globalization 500 years ago in English, globalization.
That wasn't a word.
That wasn't a word. So when the Quran says globalization, imagine for example like that, they will say, what is this? But when the Quran in context explains globalization is this phenomenon, they'll say, oh, this is what it is. But you cannot imitate in a structure like
So
this.
you're telling me the words that existed in the Quran were never spoken before the Prophet arrived?
Now you're getting this. So the Quran brought a linguistic innovation, revolution, in which it brought about the forms and derivations of words from the root which is understood, which the Arabs never knew of.
It never existed before.
It never existed. For example, or it brought the words or sentences in a meaning that didn't exist. For example, the very word the Quran, the Arabs never knew this form Quran and what it means. The Quran has to bring and explain what it is. It's a book, revelation from God. They knew, this is what it is. Because they had the word qara'a yaqra'u, the word to read, to recite, but the form in this gerund it's called, they never had that particular word Quran. They never had the word surah in its meaning, because to them surah is like a fence. But the Quran is using the surah to mean a chapter of the Quran. The verse in Arabic is an ayah. Ayah, Quran says it's a sign, it's a miracle, it's an evidence. For them, it's all new. So the Quran changes the meaning of the word and it brings about all of these things. So this is about how words are used, the placement of words and prepositions and nouns and verbs, whether it's a nominal sentence, like you start with a noun, or you start with a verb, or you start with a preposition, how they're constructed. We're talking about linguistic construction. These form, when the Quran brought it, they could not imitate it because they don't speak like that. For example, when I say, I am about to go, I don't say, I is about to go. You'd say, what are you talking about? Speak English, man. You don't say, I is going, you say, I am going. You don't say, I are going. Do you see that thing? So when the Quran brought a structure, and if they were to imitate it, they cannot imitate with, say, a substitute, with another synonym or something, in this form. It just becomes laughable. To give you one example of a laughable example. لا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى. There's an ayah like this in the Quran. No bearer can bear the sins of another. Everyone is individual, responsible for their own actions, right? So the word is mim la, yeah? To hamal, to carry. When it becomes in this form, if you want to... the word is wazara. Yeah. Wazara. I will let you speak.
No bearer of... I just want to hear that.
No bearer is going to bear the burden of another.
So no human can bear the sin of another human?
Yes, everyone is responsible for their own sin.
Yeah.
Right. So the word is wazir, the bearer of burden, with surah ukhra. If you were to substitute with this with the word ha mim la, and you put it there, hamila, yahmil, and hamilatun wizra ukhra, it becomes laughable in this form, because hamilatun automatically changes into meaning of a pregnant lady. You wanted to say no bearer of burden will bear the another, you will say no bearer of burden bears the pregnancy of another. It becomes laughable, something like that.
No one can bear the pregnancy of a pregnant woman.
It becomes like a pregnant woman, because the word now changes into a meaning. Hamila in Arabic is a pregnant woman.
Okay, yeah, I follow it.
A pregnant. Yeah. So in this particular form, when you try to put something there to imitate it, it doesn't work.
But we see this in other languages as well. Like in lexicon, you can't. Like in
you could, fine, like, you could.
Yeah.
But the Quran is bringing an attention, a challenge in the Arabic language to the masters of the Arabic language. If you think the Quran is not from God, you should be able to imitate it. So he gave you a structure of how to imitate, and then people fail to imitate it. Even ChatGPT failed to imitate it. I have a whole 1-hour lecture on the internet. Type in ChatGPT, Quran, imitation, and Mansoor, and you get that video. Helping the ChatGPT every way possible. Okay, can you, as a non-human, can you actually, with this objective criteria in mind, imitate the Quran? At the end, it's impossible because of the very nature of it. So, when the Quran brought a falsification test, and no one, in fact, the Quran says, "Kulla in ijtama'at al-ins wal jinn." Even if the whole of human beings and the jinn were to come together collectively to produce something like the Quran, لا يأتون بمثله. They will never be able to bring something like it. So the Quran is not restricting to one individual. You might say, Imo, I don't speak Arabic. Quran doesn't restrict that challenge only to you. Go and help, ask for help of your helpers and supporters to do this job. Go to SOAS, where they teach Arabic language. Go to Oxford, Cambridge, go to Harvard, go to all these places where people study in university level, have PhDs in Arabic language. But why is it still to this day people fail? Why are educated Muslims who have learned Arabic language to PhD level, done their PhDs, still remain a Muslim? If having a grasp of the language, they realize you can imitate it. Because once you become a very prolific writer, someone who can produce literature, a poet and so on, and you're an Arab, and you've mastered the language, you would know yourself whether you can imitate it or not. So why is that hundreds and thousands of millions of Muslims who are educated like that, they still remain Muslims and say it cannot be imitated?
It's the same thing for Christians who have PhDs,
And?
Hindus who have PhDs,
And?
atheists who have PhDs.
No, what's your point?
I'm saying that PhD, like you're
No, you don't understand the point. I am saying, if educated Muslim in the Arabic language, through their education, they realized that the Quranic challenge is actually a hocus pocus, because you can make something like it, then to remain as a Muslim, you really have to be a hypocrite. Do you follow? To still say I'm a Muslim and you know that challenge doesn't make sense because I can imitate it, then you are really behaving like a hypocrite and say, I still as a Muslim. But inwardly you don't believe. Why are they still believing? It's because they know from their knowledge that it cannot be imitated.
So you're saying that anyone who studies Arabic,
Anyone.
reads the Quran,
Anyone who has mastered in the Arabic language, like the Quran, they would know without shadow of doubt that the Quran cannot be
and
imitated.
if they don't follow, if they study Arabic and read the Quran and still choose not to follow Islam.
No, that's not about following. My point is, Quran offers a challenge.
Yeah.
Challenge to falsify it, to bring something.
So do you mean, what do you mean by
Falsify meaning.
I'm really glad to meet you.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Falsify meaning, if you were to bring a chapter, a surah like the Quran, then the Quranic claim is false. You would prove that the Quran can be imitated, and because it can be imitated, it cannot be from God. Because the Quran is saying it cannot be it cannot be imitated because God made it like that.
Can I disprove what you're saying by bringing in another concept? Can I do that?
You can try.
So you were talking about how the Quran is like, its poetry is like, it's beautiful in its poetry.
Composition.
In its composition. But then
Inimitable in its
you could
composition.
go to a Hindu and they'll tell you that the Vedas, so specifically the back of the Veda, is beautiful in how it's written in Sanskrit, and that they literally believe.
Is it composition impossible, unimitable?
I'm not sure about that, but
Imagine now, to help you.
Yeah.
Imagine someone claims the Vedas cannot be imitated. You can get ChatGPT to imitate it.
how though?
Because the composition of the Veda, if you look at the
Why do you say
stylistics,
imitated? Because
Imitating
you
in
believe that-
stylistics.
Yeah, okay, in stylistics, okay, cool. But in terms of narratives,
Not the beauty.
like,
we're not talking
but
about beauty and
everything-
eloquence. You need to understand, Imo, I am not talking about eloquence.
Okay.
I'm not talking about beauty because these are all subjective.
So what are you talking about then?
I'm talking about the objective criteria of stylistics. In language, there's something called stylistics, how something is spoken. So I talked about placement of words, right? If you were to place a noun before, or a verb before, or a preposition before, and so on, how you place it, and how it affects the meaning. So if you were to imitate it like this, and then you realize by imitating it, it becomes
Creates a fallacy though.
what fallacy?
So the way you compose a sentence can change its meaning, right? You agree with that?
When the Quran composes a sentence or an ayah, it has a meaning.
Yeah.
So it doesn't say bring similar meaning to it. It says, look, using this
So
structure,
you're telling me it has objective meaning to it? Every single sentence in the Quran?
try to understand what I'm saying.
I'm trying to.
The Quran is a book, literary book, right? Overall.
Yeah. No, but sorry, just quickly cut you off. My friend told me that the Quran is, you shouldn't consider it as a book, but instead a verbal, like an oral thing.
The Quran is a book. The Quran is called a kitab. The Quran is a book which is orally as well as written form.
What?
Quran has never been without a written form and has never been without an oral form.
But during-
So the
during the life of
Quran, the Prophet didn't write it,
Exactly.
so he recited the whole book.
But it was written after he died.
Please. No. It was written, he dictated every single word that is in the Quran. So how can it be written after him?
So you're telling me the Quran was written while he was alive?
Hear me out
That's
again.
what I'm asking. I'm not sure.
Hear me out.
Yeah.
Every single word of the Quran was dictated by the Prophet.
Memorized?
You're not picking up the point.
Yeah.
Imo, listen. The Quran has 114 chapters, about 6,000 ayats, right? Roughly. Few hundred pages. Within that, every single word was dictated by the Prophet in his presence. Scribes wrote it. They read it back to him aloud. And this is how the Quran was written in front of him. So what wasn't done was during his lifetime, the Quran was composed as one book with two covers at the end. Everyone had their writings. They were spread. They were spread in the writings of scrolls, in the shoulder blade of a camel, or in the leaf of a palm fiber stalk, or in stones, and so on and so forth. Right?
What's your question then? So we can all agree that the Prophet was illiterate.
Of course, he was
so
not.
How could he know what they were writing was in fact what he was saying?
Okay.
You can't. How do you know?
Imagine now I tell you, write this to me in your language, right?
Yeah.
قل هو الله أحد.
Impossible.
Okay, right. Okay, write this. God is one.
Yeah, I can write that.
In your language, and you just, I say, okay.
Well, that's because I'm literate. I can write. I can read and write.
I mean, you asked me a question and allow me to answer.
Yeah.
Then I say, okay, fine. I don't know what you've written. Read it to me back. And read it exactly. God is one. So, am I convinced that you have written it correctly?
But the Prophet cannot be 100% convinced.
Wait.
Yeah.
I dictated to you and I told you to memorize it.
Yeah.
Remember, two forms.
Yeah, so it was memorized before it was written down. I'm sorry.
Simultaneous.
Okay.
Simultaneous. Memorized and written form.
Okay.
God is one. قل هو الله أحد. God is one and unique, right? You wrote it. The brother wrote it. Bilal wrote it. This brother wrote it, right? I said, okay, you read it. He says, God is one. God is one. God is one. You say, God is one. So I know that you've written it correctly. Then I said, okay, have you memorized it? I've told you, because this is life and death, like this is speech of God. He says, yeah, God is one. قل هو الله أحد. قل هو الله أحد. You teach them. And that's not it. That's to the end of this particular verse. You would then read it to get reward. قل هو الله أحد. So many times a day. You would recite it in your prayers. قل هو الله أحد. In Ramadan, you would read it so many times. قل هو الله أحد. So this particular ayah is not that only once it was in history and that was it. No. You cannot make it disappear from history. Every ayah like that. So this is how the Quran was preserved in memory and as well as written form. So when the Quran was composed like that, we're talking about the composition. People to imitate it, they have to put in that structure, and they're failing that today. So this is what we're saying. It's a living miracle of the Quran, a living evidence that the Quran is indeed divine. Why? Because to this day, people cannot imitate it. They've imitated Shakespeare. If you have phone now, you can ask ChatGPT, can you imitate that sonnet of Shakespeare? It will do it. Few seconds. Why? Because human speech is imitable. Human composition is imitable. You can imitate the style. And that's why many forgeries happen throughout time. Later on, with a very fine tooth and eye, people said, that's a forgery, even though many things went unnoticed like that. They were so clever in imitating something. But at the end of the day, still, the point I'm making is human composition. Whether it's music, whether it's poetry, it's imitable. Quran stands clear from all of that literature and says you cannot imitate it. That's number one evidence for the Quran. Secondly, out of many falsification tests and evidence, Quran says, had this book been from other than God, surely you'd find many discrepancies and errors. And that makes sense. A book that talks about history, that talks about what's going to happen in the future, that talks about natural world, today we can say, I'm sure it can get something wrong, because people are back in those days, they knew not much about the reality. We, today with our current science and technology, we have learned about our world much better than what they thought earlier. They thought human beings were created with menstrual blood, which is in the Bible. In the Bible. Quran didn't copy any of those things, because the Quran doesn't copy anything, because it's from God.
Well, so can you explain why there are similarities in narratives Obviously, I'm not saying that it's not 100% similar.
I will explain to remind me about this, inshallah. Why there are similarities. But the point I'm making is the Quran could get so many things wrong, as you expect, logically speaking. A book 1400 years ago, how would the book know about what we have discovered about the universe today? That we know now the stars are receding from each other. The universe is expanding.
The ancient Egyptians knew all about that as well.
The ancient universe didn't know everything.
They knew about the sun, they knew about...
Did the ancient universe know that there is a common origin of the universe and the universe expanding? Because the ancient...
No. That was founded by a Christian.
Sorry?
The Big Bang Theory, that was founded by a Christian.
Which Christian?
The priest.
The French.
Yeah, the French priest.
Which French?
He was like the initial.
Yeah, the first person.
This is after the invention of science. So.
You talk about the Big Bang.
You're talking about long after the Quran.
Yeah.
When the Quran talks about أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth was joined together as one piece and God parted it asunder and He brought every living thing from water? Would they then not believe? Quran is telling you that there was a common origin of our earth and our universe, and then there was a separation, asunder, ratak and fatak. It's like Big Bang, as they say. I'm not saying this Quran is talking about the Big Bang, but the Quran is clearly telling you about the common origin of the universe and our earth and the separation afterwards. So information like this, you expect the Quran to get it wrong. Why? Because this requires a lot of scientific advanced tools to know this. Can you see the universe expanding? Look up. You can't. You can't see the universe expanding. You can't see the stars going away from each other. A lot of science and theory of science, models of science is required. So when the Quran talks about that mountains have a specific feature, today you might think, yeah, of course, but back then it's impossible. Okay, describe me a mountain.
A mountain is a landscape, a type of landscape.
Yeah.
Where
not how it's formed, but description of its external feature.
So it's upward lifting.
Upward lifting.
Yeah. Has
Yeah.
a high up to a high altitude.
Correct, but partially correct. Why I say that? Because this is just the surface of the mountains that you see. Most of the mountain has downward elevation, what we call the roots of the mountains. Most of it is downward. Have you heard of tip of the iceberg?
Yes.
What we see above the sea of the ocean
It's nothing compared
is
to
just a little bit of tip and the rest is downwards.
Yeah.
Quran describes mountains like that. It's like autad, mountain having roots. Who would have known mountains have roots like this? Can you go into a mountain near Himalayas and say, mountain, it has more roots than that? You can't start digging and finding out. Impossible. Through our technology today that we know mountains do indeed, because it's not just digging and digging and digging that you know mountains have roots. Other technologies, sonars, they reflect back how far the level is and so on and so forth. So information like this, you expect the Quran to get it wrong, not to give information which we discovered today. So the Quran, when it says, if it wasn't from God, you expect surely to find many errors and discrepancies like that. So this is another falsification test Quran offers to falsify it. Because if a sincere researcher goes and finds an error in the Quran, they are in the right mind to reject the Quran. Because according to the standards of the Quran, very criteria of the Quran, it cannot be from God. So Islam is that religion which your heart and your mind already agrees with. So ask yourself, why are you not a Muslim right now? What is stopping you from accepting Islam? Is it because you want to learn Islam to the level where I want to know all the commentaries, what it says? No one can become so proficient and so knowledgeable on everything about the Quran. Even the scholars learn every day. Even the scholars. So you want to know everything the Prophet said. Hundreds and thousands of hadiths. You can stay and read all your life and you think there's so much a treasure. It's like you're dropping the ocean when you start. What is it? If you think this is the case, you'll never even finish the ocean of knowledge of Islam. But if you know that what it requires for you to Muslim is to be convinced that there is no God worthy of worship except one and only true God. If you're already in your heart, That's first part. If you agree that Prophet Muhammad is indeed a messenger of God, that's all requires two things. Accepting that he's a messenger of God, accepting God is the only one worthy of worship. That is the beginning of your journey to make you into the fold of Islam, and then you take the journey of learning. Every day we learn. I'm trying to learn Arabic language, still learning. It's vast ocean. You see? So learning never stops. When you become a Muslim, have you stopped learning, brother? Right. So it's not that you have to learn everything. No, but there are certain essential things you need to understand. So we believe in what we call 5 pillars of Islam, you know, right? So all of these are the articles of faith, the pillars of Islam. If you accept and believe in them, you are a Muslim. So all it's required from you is to make that declaration that yes, I do testify. Are you ready? Bismillah. First, I will tell you in English, as I mentioned again. Basically, you will say, I bear witness and testify. English first, okay. So that you know what I'm saying in Arabic. I bear witness and testify.
I bear witness and testify.
That there is no God worthy of worship.
That there is no God worthy of worship.
Except Allah.
Except Allah.
The one and only.
The one and only.
Without any partners.
Without any partners.
And I bear witness and testify.
And I bear witness and testify.
That Muhammad is Allah's servant and his messenger.
Is Allah's servant and his messenger.
Ashhadu.
Ashhadu.
An. لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. الله أكبر. Welcome to Islam, my brother. Welcome to Islam. Welcome to Islam.